Hello. Please ignore the sick voice. I've been dying to make a video for so long, and I'm not going to let my cold stop me from making a video. So if you hear a really nasally voice, I am so sorry. Again, I'm a sinful human with a flesh that decided to just randomly get sick because people in my family were. So today I thought I would discuss the Apostle Peter because this is something that I talk about quite frequently when I discuss science in the Bible. And one of the things that really came to mind was how I always talk about him, and I made a bunch of episodes about him and some of the other apostles, but mainly Peter, talking about his career as a fisherman. And you're probably thinking, well, okay, he was just a fisherman, that means nothing. But honestly, there's so much more to it that I feel like the Lord had shown me just about his career in general. And I know a lot of people say don't fit the Bible to our modern times, because I know a lot of people today will try to put 2025 language into the Bible. They'll read like their preconceived notions into the text, which is known as eisegesis, which is wrong. And I 100% agree you shouldn't do that. But I think it's very telling and very interesting how the Apostle Peter, if he lived today, if he decided to be born today, or if God decided to, have him be born today, and if God were to come down to earth as a human being today in our modern 2025 context, what career would Peter have chosen? Now, I had said this on Instagram, and somebody said, well, he would have just been a fisherman. Now, sure, he could have just been a fisherman, but I think there's more to the story than that, because he may have loved fishing so much. We don't really know Peter's family story, or like what his parents did, meaning like what his dad did for work. But it's very telling and assuming that he probably was a fisherman, because Peter had to have learned fishing from somebody. And most likely his father was also a fisherman. It was probably a passed down business where his dad was fishing down at the docks, trying to make a living, and then he just taught Peter at a young age, and then Peter went on and did that. And we don't know, again, if Peter had children himself, and if he would have taught his children how to fish. But I find that very interesting and telling. That's like Peter really was into fishing. Now you're going to say, well, Jewish boys at the time had to pick a trade, so he just chose fishing because his dad did, and like he just kind of had to make money and pay his taxes, the whole story. Now, yes, I would say yes, that, he had to do that to pay his taxes and all of his, bills at the time, whatever they were. Of course, they're not 2025 bills like we have today, but again, I do think that he would have had a passion for the water. I mean, learning at a young age, like he could have been really young age learning how to fish with his dad teaching him, the ropes on how to fish. No pun intended, the ropes, like he learned a lot about the fishing trade and how to, catch fish and all that other thing. And I bet his dad did teach him a lot of, here's how you catch this type of fish. You throw the net out at this time. You do X, Y, Z. And I think because Peter was shown the way how to fish, I'm assuming, again, we don't really know what his dad did. I think I read somewhere that his dad may have been a fisherman. But again, we don't know for sure. The Bible doesn't tell us, and I'm not going to read or assume anything that the Bible doesn't tell us. But it would be very interesting if his dad was a fisherman and he grew up learning how to fish from a young age and he fell in love with it. Now, going back to the idea of it being 2025 and saying, well, if Peter lived today, what would he have done? And I find this very interesting that if Peter, loved fishing that much, he may have wanted to pursue a career in fish. Now, again, he could have been a fisherman, but a lot of people, especially where I'm from an area where there is a lot of fishing. But unfortunately, the fishing around here, you can't make a ton of money. And of course, you can't really make a lot of money in science either. But again, he probably would have loved it so much, he may have wanted to study fish and like be an ichthyologist or something, because he may have loved it that much and just wanted to know everything he could on how to catch fish, that he said, you know what, I'm going to pursue a career in this. So I find this interesting, because if Peter lived today and he decided, what am I going to go to school for? He probably would have chose something in the marine science field. He probably would have said, I'm going to go study fish and learn how, catch fish or do something with fish. He could have either been like what you would consider an aquarist at an aquarium, which means that you would just take care of fish in like a large tank, or he may have just been an ichthyologist out there studying in the field. But I definitely think he would have done something in that field. And I think it's very interesting how Jesus chooses disciples, a lot of them with scientific type careers, not even just Peter himself. We think about Matthew. Matthew has a lot of qualities that could be attributed to like a data scientist, knowing his numbers and crunching numbers, and a lot of similar attributes to like an accountant. And I find that very interesting, because his numbers, he probably would have done something with data science or something with that if he lived today as well. And I find that interesting. And if we even go to somebody like Luke, who is not an immediate disciple, he's not one of the 12, but he was a disciple of Paul, he was a physician. And it's very interesting how, even the Bible says our good friend Luke, the physician, or the doctor, as some translations will say, he was a doctor. And if you notice a lot of what Luke writes about in the Gospel of Luke, a lot of his stories when it pertains to Jesus healing people, he talks about leprosy like really well. The accuracy and precision of how he can describe leprosy is incredible. Like no other disciple that wrote a gospel could talk about leprosy the way that he did. And it makes sense because if he's a doctor and he's quote unquote studying this stuff, of course it's not like modern, going to a university, but again, the stuff that he learned, he would have known what it was, learning how to treat different things. And there's one parable about how like he has to put oil on a wound or something, but I feel like that's so interesting because I could see how that really captured the attention of Luke, like learning about this through the eyewitness accounts, because he says that in the beginning, these are eyewitness accounts of the people who literally were eyewitnesses of this. I bet those are the stories that he really wanted to highlight because that was his passion. Like he grew up literally and, was a doctor. So of course that kind of stuff like intrigues him. He's like, ooh, another medical like story. I'm going to write that down. Yeah, no, I know a lot about this. I can really expand on that. I could explain more about, what leprosy actually is because I have the knowledge of that. Because again, Peter wouldn't have known anything about leprosy. And no, Peter did not write a gospel, even if, there might be a gospel out there that claims to be written by Peter. I don't know that, but that wouldn't be Peter anyway. But again, other disciples, like for example, Matthew, he doesn't know anything about leprosy. He's not a doctor. Again, he was more of like the accountant type with money. So again, it's interesting how Luke, with his, skills and abilities, understanding the ideas of how to be, a doctor and all this medical terminology of the time, it's quite interesting. If we go back to what would they have done if they were, in today's society, I really believe Luke would have been a doctor of some sort. He would have probably been either a surgeon at a hospital or maybe just a local, regular general doctor, but he definitely would have done something in the medical field for sure. And I believe he would have, continued that path. And I really do believe that he was accompanying Paul a lot in these journeys, not just for the sake of, the gospel. I bet a lot of it too, he was offering medical healing and medical advice. I know a lot of people, I don't know if you've seen that today, some people go on these things called medical missions where they'll go to different countries and, help out and spread the gospel and also help with medical needs. And I do believe that Luke, again, could have done something like that. Now, again, I'm not trying to read my beliefs into the text. And if you feel that I'm doing that here, I am very sorry. If you truly believe that, please don't take that the wrong way. But I just want to say that I find this very interesting. And I bring this up because a lot of people today think you have to choose between either the Bible or science. Like you have to choose between me going into the field of either marine biology or being a doctor in the medical field or some other form of science. Like I feel like people just feel like they have to choose. Like either I believe in this book that tells me that God created the world in 7 days, in 6 days and rested on the seventh, or I have to choose or believe this scientist that tells me that, we evolved from, monkeys and that it all, Big Bang and all that. And I think people think they're so not in line with each other that like, oh, they're so polar opposites that I have to either choose between the two. It's like, I can't be a scientist that believes in God. Like I either choose marine biology or I choose God. And that was literally my life. Like I was in 2021, I had to make a choice. Like, what am I choosing? And I chose God. But again, I didn't drop, marine biology as a whole, meaning like I didn't drop believing in it. Like I didn't think, oh, these people that, I knew were completely wrong, because no, they're not wrong. Now, no, they don't acknowledge God, but again, they're not wrong in the sense that their belief system of like what they understood about, the environment wasn't wrong. But again, people feel the need to choose. And it's like the disciples of Jesus wouldn't have chose. Do you think that Peter himself, yes, in that moment, he had to choose either he was going to serve God or still fish for fish. But again, he goes back to fishing even after Jesus, I think it's resurrects or something like that. Not resurrects. I think it was just after he died. But again, Peter, if he lived today, he would have been a disciple of Jesus. And he would have probably, yes, he probably would have left the university if Christ met him at his university or at his aquarium or at his research lab, whatever it was. But again, he wouldn't have denied science. He still would have been like, oh, that creature's really cool. Oh, that fish is awesome. He still would have probably taught people fish stories while he was ministering, like about Jesus to people. And same thing with Luke. Luke wouldn't have just said, okay, I'm not going to, heal you or help you medical wise. Like if somebody's sick, he's going to give them advice. He's not just going to say, oh, well, health says, that you should try medicine. No. He's not going to say, oh, health says you should try medicine, and then just not talk about God, or be the opposite and say, well, no, God, it's God over medicine. Because it's not God over anything. It's not saying, okay, God over medicine or God over the ocean. I mean, it's not. We don't have to make a choice. We could literally choose to believe in both. There's no, I have to choose between one or the other, or, they're incompatible, but they're not. I don't have to say, okay, I'm going to believe in, science. It's a hard choice. I mean, if I was faced with that choice right now, especially with all the evidence we have for science, of course more people are going to choose science, because if they could read or research scientific data, from an actual researcher right now, like a scientific journal, and they can understand that journal, they're going to most likely go for the journal. Why? Because they're going to see the evidence. But again, they're going to look at the Bible and say, oh, it's so old school. It's been translated XYZ amount of times, all these things. They're going to come up with the excuse as to why they can't believe it. But again, they're going to think that they have to choose, science or the Bible. And unfortunately, I don't see many people out there today saying, hey, I can choose to believe in both. I don't have to choose between one or the other. Because in today's society, God doesn't want us choosing between one and the other. He's like, they work in perfect harmony. You're the one that's making it complicated and confusing by saying they don't agree in XYZ. He's like, I've chosen disciples. He's literally chosen disciples that literally had scientific careers. And we're out here thinking that we have to choose between God and science. We're out here like, oh, I have to either be a scientist or I have to either be a follower of Jesus. Like, I don't know. Like, you could literally believe in both things. There's no difference in that. There's no conflicting beliefs. Like, I absolutely think it's okay to take vaccines and go to the doctor and surgeries and all the things you need. I mean, I literally took 3 shots of, the Pfizer vaccine or something like that. I take vaccines. I think it's fine. Because you know what? Luke, the doctor, would have told me at the time, yeah, take that vaccine, you're good. I mean, Luke, the doctor, probably would have been the one administering my shot if he was here today. I mean, honestly, he probably would have been the one encouraging it. But again, he wouldn't have said, don't trust God. He would have said, God can work through medicine. He would have said things like, oh, God's going to work through that shot. God can work through anything. Because again, God can do anything he wants. So the bottom line is that we don't have to choose. And if you're in this moment of like, oh, I got to choose, I'm confused, my school is telling me XYZ, but then my church is telling me XYZ. Don't feel pressured. You don't have to say, okay, I got to choose either or. They can work in perfect harmony. If you're right now saying, I'm a Christian and I'm considering going into a scientific career, but I'm just like, I don't want to do it because I feel like people are going to be like, why are you doing that? XYZ. Go ahead and go for it. Even if you're a scientist right now and are afraid to stand up and say, no, I do believe that Jesus was real. I do believe that he died on the cross and rose again 3 days later. And I am a scientist. So be it. Because they can work in perfect harmony. That's not your problem if somebody else doesn't agree with you, because guess what? The opinions of others don't matter. God's opinion matters. And his word clearly states that we can be scientific professionals, do scientific work, and also believe in him. So I hope that this helped you out. I want to just preface by saying I am not in a scientific career myself, but I was at one point considering becoming a marine mammal trainer, which is basically where you work with animals. You know the whole deal, the cute sea lion and the trainer kind of deal. So I am not doing that currently. I didn't end up doing that because God kind of pulled me out of that before I was too deep into it. But again, I highly respect people in fields like that because, again, I think it's super cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and peace be with you all.